how I make my livelihood. So I appreciate you trusting me with your time and money on a weekend where it's going to be hot. This should be a really good time. We're going to try to go pretty aggressive and go fast, take the shortest lunch we can and get out of here as early as possible so we're dodging the hot part of the day. If that's okay with you.
Sounds good.
Right, so first thing we're going to do is talk about dry fire a little bit as far as how you warm up to get started in your training or your shooting. I like to start every day pretty much the same way. It'll go at a minimum. I'll do stretches from my shoulder down to my fingertips, the most important of which I think is the muscles that control your actual fingers. So I'd like you to do this with me. I take my hand and stretch it out with your wrist upright like this and take each individual finger and pull it back, and you're going to feel a stretch basically like these are the flexors of your forearms that close your fingers up, like in this part of your arm right here, the bottom side of your arm. You should feel a stretch that runs like from the middle of your wrist all the way up to your arm. Do each one for like 10 seconds at least. And this is something that's nice. You can kind of do it on your steering wheel before you get started during the day when you're going out to the range or you're going to do your dry fire or whatever. But I'll do a warm up that pretty much starts every training session the same, whether it's a dry fire session, live fire session, or a match. Just as a good way to get warmed up and hit the ground running the same way you would without having to do like an extensive live fire warm up, because I don't really care for doing that. I like to hit the ground running as best I can. All right, so I'm sure you should be feeling that. I've already done this a little bit, so you guys feel free to keep doing it while I keep yakking. Next thing I'll do is I'll start to go into doing light dry fire. So I'll, at least at a minimum, I'll put the gun in each hand and grip it really hard with each hand for like 10 or 15 seconds, to the point that I'm kind of starting to shake and convulse here. I'm trying to basically warm up just my actual grip strength, and I'll do this with each hand. And I'm trying to make sure my hands are working well. And then I'll place both hands on the gun with the exact grip placement that I want. And I'll practice just kind of bringing it up to my eye line to make sure that I'm feeling out what I want my grip to feel like when it makes it up to actually be shooting, right? I think this is good just because it gives you, it reminds you what a perfectly assembled grip is going to feel like before you get out there and just start doing full-blown dry fire reps. If you kind of miss, if you remind yourself what you're shooting for, it's going to make it more likely you'll notice if you don't get the grip you want when you start doing reps, opposed to just going straight into doing draws or gun handling stuff. And I'll escalate into doing, a little bit of draws, maybe some trigger control at speed like we're going to do in this first drill here. So I'm just practicing getting the gun out, trying to be very aware of all my tension, making sure my hands are landing where I want on the gun, right? And within 3 to 5 minutes of messing around at a safe table, you should be able to hit the ground running on your first stage the way you want to, as long as you have a good, well thought out system that's going to work for you. Sound good? So what I'm going to have us do is we're all going to hop on the 5, right? And we're going to do pretty much what I just described. I want you to do like presentations from high ready, make sure your grip is sorted out, and escalate into doing some light draws and like easy dry fire work just to make sure the sights are showing up aligned, your grip's consistently hitting like you want, you're not getting tense or doing something silly before we begin. All right, so everybody hop on. This is the 5-yard line right here. Basically the form and presentation of how people hold the gun. Most of you guys are pretty squared away. What I do basically is you all have an agreeable grip, like thumbs go forward, fill in the spaces, like make it so you can grip it all the way around the gun. With your upper body presentation, people have a tendency to like get way over involved, like between their elbow and their neck, right? So like the head will crane way down, the shoulder will crane way forward, and they're gonna get a lot of unnecessary tension involved with that process, right? If you look at our model Scott, like when he presents the gun up to the target, right? It looks effortless, like the whole upper body just standing there like you're having a conversation with someone, and the gun just basically comes up with only the arms, right? So we want to basically put the gun in your hands, get the gun as far away from your face as you can, bring your neck and shoulders back to neutral, and then just unlock your elbows. Right, that's pretty much what we're going for. And you're going to find there's a lot of situations where that'll start to deviate. Either your head will crane in, your arms will start to walk in back towards your face under stress in various scenarios. You want to really check yourself on that. Doing basic dry fire work like this is of course the most elementary way to check it, and you want to be very aware of it if it starts to happen, right? It's not just like, okay, is the sight there, is my grip placement there? You want to make sure that your whole system is working well, right? So I'm going to give you another minute to sort yourself out and be aware of that kind of stuff, and then we're going to get started with some drills, okay? You guys can all hear me okay? So we're going to start doing some drills that are going to tee up some of these marksmanship problems, these gross marksmanship issues we have with our grip tension and trigger control. The first one we're going to do we call doubles on demand. So procedurally what I'm going to do is have the gun on target, have the timer on delay. When the timer goes, I'm going to rip 2 shots as fast as I can, and I'm trying to basically have the fastest reaction time possible and the fastest split I can manage consistently. And then you're going to have it's going to produce a group that you can then look at too. Okay, so ears. I'll do this drive first for 4 or 5 reps here so you can watch what happens, and then I'm going to actually shoot it. Let's slap your ears on. So it'll look kind of like this. Follow through a little bit more so you guys can watch, just like this. Okay, so I'm looking for very minimal sight motion there. I want to be able to pull the trigger hard and fast. I'm not trying to minimize the motion that I'm doing with the trigger. I'm just going to pull it fast, essentially hard, twice in a row as quickly as I can. Got to get this sorted so I don't go deaf.
Hearing is good.
We're gonna edit it. We're gonna cut this in post. Probably not.
Probably not going to edit this out. No, that sounds like too much work.
Okay, so it'll go like this. Right. So you see a couple errors there that'll start to creep out immediately, right? As you're waiting for that standby, like if you've done trigger control at speed before, when you hear standby or you imagine the standby command has come, you're gonna know how much static tension you're working with. Like if you have a tendency to push down on the gun to fight the recoil, you're probably gonna notice it. If not, the second shot as you're trying to fight against it, that's the thing that's gonna happen, right? I'm aiming here, the second shot I push down on it hard to try to make it not go where I want. Otherwise, right, like an 1.5 inch, 2 inch group is more or less what we want. You guys understand the drill? Okay, let's get to it. We're gonna do a dry first. This one might have been mine.
Yes,
is this yours?
That's mine.
That one's yours. What do we think's going on here? Anyone?
He's shooting well. I mean, he had the one that we dipped.
Definitely, right?
And
so we have overall a fairly concentric group, and then every now and then we have these flyers that are going like way high or way low, right? So what do we? I mean, like, that indicates what?
Shooting too.
Certainly an inconsistency in grip pressure, right? If we're seeing shots that are running like way high like this, that tells you probably like the support hand's not getting the job done at a minimum. And every now and then we see shots that'll dip way low, which it tells you what? Fighting the gun, right? Like the gun's recoiling, you naturally want to like push back on it, and then you're fighting on it. This indicates to me this is probably like a moderately well sorted out timing issue where you're used to like pushing down on the gun, and every now and then, right, like when you play that timing game, rather than gripping the gun hard and passively controlling recoil, letting it do what it's going to do, you're going to lose that timing game. So sometimes they'll go in a weird direction like this where the hand slacks off, sometimes you push them down. Let's look at a more basic one. We have a classic seatbelt right here, right? Where the shots kind of string like with the firing hand from top right to low left and a right-handed shooter. What do we think's going on with that?
Too much
Firing hand tension, probably, right? This would be like colloquial jerking the trigger kind of advice, but probably what's going on, right, is this whole hand is like tensing all together. This hand's not relaxed, it can't run with just one finger, so this whole hand is pulling the trigger, and we end up with these shots that'll push down away, especially when you start to apply it at speed, right? It's like once that, you know, that it's about time to shoot, it's like this whole hand clutches up and pushes the shots away from your firing hand, right? You understand the basic diagnostics on some of these things? Okay, we'll patch up a little bit.
So release the pressure on the firing hand.
Yes.
Release the pressure on the firing hand.
That's the basic correction for this, definitely, right? You relax that firing hand so its only job is to pull the trigger, try to grip it as hard as you can with your support hand, and you'll at least see this become a concentric group that's strung this way, okay? Let's patch up down to like a small hole, and then we'll try more. Yeah. Well, I just told you to relax your firing hand, right?
Yeah.
It seems to me most likely, especially...
Okay, set a left.
Especially where you have that big ledge on the gun, right? Question was essentially, hey, I have a bunch of shots. I'm a right-handed shooter. I have shots that are here, like where my first shot is going, and then I have shots like over here or over here where my second shot is going. What do we suppose is causing that? Understanding that basically most issues are caused by pushing with the opposing hand direction. What do we think?
The thumb's pushing the gun.
Also, here's another more inside scoop. I just told Keith a minute ago, hey, like when you're drawing the gun out, the sight is shaking like this before you're stopping for a second, right? So you got to relax your firing hands. When the gun comes up, it's just still, and you're not having to like fight to like get your muscles to stop before the sight stops shaking. That was too much information. What's going on, right, is basically he's relaxing this hand. He's doing nicely, like I said, grip with this hand. And on that back corner, right, like every time the second shot goes, the support hand is throttling pressure and kicking shots over to the right. You saw when I did it, my first rep, it was the same thing. It was shot like here, right? The same exact thing happens. If you really bite into them one specific corner and then like this hand like tenses up to try to control the recoil, it's going to push away from that side. You'll see with people that have palm swells that really dig into them hard like that, that'll happen a lot. You've got to practice a lot to figure out how to make circumferential pressure and not just dig onto one side of the gun that way, or that'll happen all the time. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, let's do some more. So I guess before we continue, does everyone understand sort of the purpose and the methodology behind the drill we just did and how to work on it? right? The one across the board criticism I'll give or critique I'll give is like the more follow through you apply, particularly in dry fire, the more you're going to be able to learn from this, right? If you find yourself like, you know, you snatch through the trigger twice and it seems like the sights are stable and you immediately rip the gun back in to rack it and keep going, it's likely you'll miss details of what's going on. Like if you see like you double stroke it and then like you push through and you see that dipping that's happening like in that moment when you would be firing the second or third or whatever shot, like that's information you should pick up on. That still indicates that you're wanting to fight the gun more than you need to, and that you're not just passively controlling recoil by gripping it hard and still and letting the gun do what it's going to do. Does that make sense? That's a really important takeaway in my opinion. So mostly a dry fire drill, practicing pulling the trigger hard and fast, twice as fast as you can. In live fire, I want to do this at like 5 to 7 yards and produce a fist-sized group. Makes sense? And we want like 20, give or take 20 splits or less. All right, next drill we're going to do is going to be a little bit more for precision shooting, but it's going to tee up some of those mechanical problems we just did really nicely. So I'm just going to shoot this and then we'll talk about it after the fact, okay? Thank you, Vin. Right. So, what did I do?
Practical accuracy.
What?
Practical accuracy.
Scott knows what it's called, right? So basically I'm looking at a spot on the target, like a very specific spot that I can see, and I'm trying to just only shoot when I see a fixed level of sight input. In this case, this distance to shoot like a golf ball sized group, I can pretty much just see the color of my fiber on that spot and just shoot every time I see that color. Basically, white paster, green fiber, just green on white, green on white, green on white, and reacting to that every time. It's not about the pacing or listening to what it sounds like and producing a cadence on the target. Every time you're shooting, it's like visually, it's a decision to shoot based on what you're seeing. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm gonna walk back to the 10 and we're gonna try it again and we'll see how it's different. Okay, so besides the fact the group opened up, what else changed?
Speed.
The speed changed a little bit, right? But it's, from my perspective, I know to basically produce that same size group, a golf ball or a fist size group, I'm gonna need to see not just the fiber, I'm probably gonna need to start to see the shape of the sight. So I'm using that sort of that meat of material on top of my fiber as the aiming device and try to only shoot when I see that on that spot. Right? And you see obviously that's still a bit aggressive to shoot a golf ball size group. Not that that's a bad group or anything, but the point I'm getting at is there's a lot of attention to detail to the visual encoding and the amount of fundamentals that are required to make a given group happen at a given distance. Does that make sense? But again, following the rules of this drill is the first thing we're really going to be attentive to, making sure you're looking at that spot, only shooting when you get the fixed level of sight put you need, and not allowing yourself to listen to it or let your vision suck back. I want to look at that spot and be visually oriented in terms of how I'm allowing the shots to go. Okay? 5 yards first. At once, if that makes sense. Okay, so like you can only focus on one thing at a time. You really kind of choose. For this drill, I recommend starting just being very visually oriented, look at that spot, and let the dot behavior kind of inform what you think is going on with your upper body position. Okay. But usually for most people, when you're working through like getting your hands and arms and everything to do what you want, it's like it's usually good being able to be fast and precise that's hard. Like doing more speed-oriented drills, not necessarily this kind of thing. Guys, let's rip one rep at 5 yards. Just get back in the same sheet of music, then we'll come back to 10, okay? So, what changed there?
Level of confirmation.
Shitload of confirmation, right? Like I'm basically letting the gun like totally stop moving and then initiating the trigger press. Like I can't see anything short of perfection if I want to get hits back here, particularly with irons, but pretty much with the dot too, right? Hopefully at this point you're understanding there's gradients to how much like fundamental application you need. That's kind of on like just a continuous spectrum. The point of this drill is to give you at a minimum a really good functioning understanding of what you're capable of with different fundamental approaches, and hopefully to cultivate the ability to pull out different tools to hit different targets at different distances, right? Through this drill, you should over time cultivate a really keen understanding of how the different confirmation levels work, what you can like, how you can manipulate the trigger or like pay attention to your grip to make shots stack right behind your sight when you need to, which of course is a very important tool to have on a stage when the shots get a little bit tighter. Does that make sense? So we're gonna try the same thing. We're gonna do a rep at 10 yards. We're gonna come back here and do 3 back here. All right, back to 10.
Gripping the same, like just as you are at 25 versus 10 versus 5.
Yeah, so the grip is a function of what controls the recoil, right? So, and grip is honestly the most important marksmanship fundamental there is. So the recoil control system, what I'm doing with the actual grip pressure application does not change at all based on the distance. The only mechanical fundamental that'll change is maybe how carefully I pull the trigger. Like at 25, it's no secret. We just did drills where I kind of proved that you can get a decent marksmanship result by jamming on the trigger really hard. But obviously, like, you're gonna make it easier on yourself to stack shots precisely if you press the trigger carefully and feel through the wall, right? So it might make sense to do something like that as you get farther and farther away. And it's probably likely that cueing wise, you're gonna think about keeping this hand soft so that it doesn't twitch and you notice that if you have a problem. But I'm not changing the pressure application as the distance changes. Like this system, keeping the gun, hands locked in the gun is the same all the time. Is everyone on board with that?
Yes, sir.
Right. And again, the point of the drill is you understand the procedure, we just did it a bunch, but the point of the drill is to cultivate an awareness and an ability to have different tools to hit shots very precisely like you need to, you know, that you understand what they are and like what makes yourself tick and how to produce those hits like you need to on a stage, right? You should cultivate pretty quickly the ability to say, okay, if I let the sight stop and I feel through the wall, I keep my eye where I want it, the shots are going to be in a group like this every single time, right? Or at a minimum an awareness that if I try to shoot like this difficulty target, I'm gonna fail this percentage of the time, right? But it's gonna give you a lot of really good information about what you need to do to shoot precisely in pretty short order. Does everyone understand all that? We're gonna do some running around before it gets crazy hot. You know, it's a little bit out of order. So we'll do that now. Basically, we're gonna have 3 setups here. We have one that's like a full-blown run, one that's kind of a medium-sized space, and then like a short scuttle over there in the end. Right, so on every drill, we're gonna kind of use these like cones. I'm just gonna end standing over one of these bars, all right? For this full-size run, I'm shooting a target. I'm gonna basically break my hand off, like turn and look at the spot that I wanna go on the ground, and I'm gonna run as hard as I can until it gets to the point where I really need to cut energy to be able to land in this position with control, which will be give or take this much distance. And the goal is to have the gun up, gripped, aimed on that target so that when I land with my feet in this position, I'm ready to shoot. It would be the same thing the other direction. I shoot, look, run, break, hands, and your eyes and gun are on the target, like, you know, a little bit at pretty much at the same time. Does that make sense? What's going to control like how fast you can do this is like how prepared you are to shoot when you get there. It's not like a football drill where all I need is to have like my body in this location and that location. I have to have like a proper grip and be ready to shoot. So this is more or less a finesse thing, right? It's really critical. That vision aspect I mentioned, looking at that spot you want to go, I think is really, really important. Running hard like you mean it, within reason, and as reasonable is important. And landing in an appropriate stance is also very important. Does that make sense? So I'm going to show you dry what all 3 of these positions are going to look like, and then we're just going to stop the dissertation and have you try it, and we'll address questions as necessary, because there's like a zillion things I could say, but most of them won't apply to individuals, okay? So, shooting a target here. Try the same thing in the opposite direction. Watch the grass, it's slippery. Right. So that's long moves. You see, that's a full-blown motion where I look and I turn my hips to run in the direction I want to go. Medium. The huge difference here is like how you control the gun or how you manipulate the gun as necessary is going to be kind of dependent on your skill level. If I have a small distance like this and nothing to do in between, I'm going to focus probably a lot on having the gun up and ready when I get there, right? I'm not going to take a hand off. I'm just going to keep my grip together, look where I want to go, and move naturally. Like this. time I broke a hand off against my own will. Okay? Smaller distance, the priority is pretty much always on keeping your grip together and having your vision on the next target so that you can be ready to shoot when you get there. Is everyone loosely with me? And I'm sure you have a lot of questions and apprehensions before we get started. I'm not going to get any more detail than necessary unless we get into a case-by-case basis. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, let's get started. So I can take 3 in the front. How you position the gun while you move is something that's controversial, I guess you could say. My main point of order is to make sure it's always obvious that you're trying to do the right thing. Right? So it doesn't really matter if you actually broke the 180 or did an unsafe thing, because if an RO just doesn't like your attitude or the way you move and they stop you, it's probably not going to go your way. Right? So as a rule of thumb, what I do is I do a technique, it's actually a max technique that is called lead with the sights. So anytime I'm going a lateral move, what I'll do is I'll basically hold the sights on the gun, will be the first part of the gun to go in a direction. And I attempt to hold this still, right, while I just run with this arm. But the main point, like, is the gun is pointed at the back berm, right? It's not pointed here. It's not like out on the line. I'm not chugging with this arm. I don't need to get any flack for something that I'm doing that's not unsafe, but gets called because it looks wrong. Same thing in the opposite direction. I'm gonna hold the gun sights first. Gun is pointed at the back berm. I'm not like threatening this line. I'm not pointing it down at the ground. Like, both of these are safe directions for a bullet to go, right? But it doesn't look right. And if you get stopped, it's gonna be your problem. All right, so as a rule of thumb, this arm, the one that's controlling the gun, I'm going to hold still, and I'm going to run with the other arm to make it obvious I'm trying to do the right thing. Make sense? Not going to mention it again unless I see someone do something that's actually sketchy, but that is how I prefer to do things for that reason. Okay? Let's continue. One issue people have is they come in a position and they're not low or wide enough, right? I'm sure you've heard people say that just anecdotally. You might even heard me tell you that so far already. Reason being, right, if I come in like with a low, wide stance, it's easy to leave out of this position in any direction. It's also when I come in with a low, wide stance, it's more forgiving on letting your weight rock to center. Right, if I come in like shoulder height like this, I have to like calibrate that speed of motion perfectly to not topple over, right? If that makes sense. So if I come in low and wide, the same way, I don't even have to like do the perfect amount of braking because my weight will naturally center up a lot quicker, right? Making this happen as a matter of habit is a hard thing for people. And I think a lot of people get the idea that you have to practice running around like this to make this happen, which I pretty patently disagree with. If you just make it a habit of doing your static dry fire work, like draws, reloads, and that type of bullshit, from this position, this will become a habit really quickly. And you won't have to like run around and sweat a bunch to really make this turn into a habit. All right, so if you're finding yourself naturally when you're doing draws and stuff, like standing, like you're shooting a steel challenge, like try to check yourself on that habit and get in this low position you want to be when you're doing static work, and this will become a habit pretty quickly. Sound good? Do you guys want to try this live a little bit? You really don't need to, or we can try doing more stuff. Do you have any questions on this so far? This is pretty basic stuff. I just wanted to get it out of the way before it got crazy hot. Right, so everyone have ammo? Ooh, it's on me then, I gotta get going. Okay, I'll set up some targets. So, something I started doing over this winter that I think is really, really good is working on basic fundamentals drills, but from a really unorthodox position and with small unorthodox motions getting into that position. Right, so we have some ports here that are at various heights. We're gonna basically do doubles drill, like through a port from a weird start position. Right, so you're gonna have to step in, like kind of orient yourself to get into the port and then do the drill. And you're probably gonna find that it's gonna freshen up that drill in a way that you may not expect. Right, so lots of people do doubles drill. Everyone kind of knows the bends in the road and how that works. If you haven't, basically you're going to draw, shoot 4 pairs of shots. Your job is to keep your eye on the target, shoot as fast as you can on the pairs, like put the gun back on the spot between each pair. Okay, and I'll demo this so that you understand. But adding in these weird elements is going to really spice it up a lot, and I think you'll probably find it's kind of a fresh look at a familiar drill. So I'm going to grab this stick, put it right here. Fix it up after, it's okay. I need my earplugs. There's gonna be like 3 hours of content of me putting on earplugs on PSTG now.
It'll be good. Well, you're gonna put this on your YouTube channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So if you're watching this at home, hit the fast forward 15 seconds button. That'll have your plugs in.
Oh, don't worry. I'm gonna do a special editing job to make this seem really
I bet.
professionally edited.
You're gonna put it in slow motion?
Yeah. No, I'll just have Apple compile it all while I play video games.
Sounds awesome. ChatGPT, make a Mason Lane fan training video.
The output for that might be fun.
I just don't want to be deaf. Might still be. All right, so I'm just gonna do this and we'll talk about it for a second. Basically, I aggressively move into that position, build a proper stance, and then do the doubles drill. I'm trying to point the gun in the middle of the target, rip a pair of shots as fast as I can, recenter, rip a pair of shots. And you see if you have experience with doubles, you see that's pretty far from a perfect group, right? It's not really a group at all. Right, so it does make this quite a bit more difficult when the gun intends to walk in towards your face, when it's hard to not let your upper body tense up because you're in a weird position. That's kind of the point of the drill. I'm gonna try the same thing on the target in the back and more or less just relax the pacing, focus more on seeing what I need to, and less on just controlling the outcome with my form, and we'll see what happens. Alright, definitely saw a couple of those, the whole gun hooked down, the same thing happened, right? This firing hand was a little bit tight, kind of milking on the gun as I'm shooting, so that second shot is pushing down low and left. That checks out. Everyone understand what we're gonna do? Basically, we're going to start not looking at the target you're going to, in a weird start position, aggressively move in, do doubles drill. Sound good? We have 4 setups here. We'll get them all set up kind of similarly, and then we'll get started.
Do you alternate the targets then? Like one rep you use the close, the second rep you use the back target, or?
Well, usually if it goes perfectly, I might be inclined to do something like that, but that was pretty far from what happened. Right, so I'm just kind of have 2 targets here, so that you have the ability to practice multiple targets. If we have some of these superstars here, they're going to show up and immediately chew out a group like this. This is going to enable you to try something a little bit different.
Okay.
Right, but usually I would do the same thing so that I can get consistent information about what is happening on the drill. I'm not going to use a bunch of different targets. Sound good? Earplugs weren't in all the way. Talk about transitions. So transitions are one of the big places people lose time in the sport, of course. It's also one of the places people lose points, and I don't necessarily know if folks appreciate that. Not every time you shoot a misplaced shot, it's a direct result of marksmanship, right? It's not like every time you sling a Charlie, it's oh yeah, I was on the right spot, and then I pushed the shot to the wrong place. Usually that's not the case, I would dare say. So being visually precise and then having your body stay relaxed and follow your vision are the 2 most important aspects of making transitions happen well. Okay, so for example, we're going to do a drill here. We're basically going to shoot 1 shot on each for 6 rounds in alternation on these 2 targets. So I'll dry fire that, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like. I want you to pay attention to my body and my overall form and function, and see how much effort it looks like I'm putting into doing this. Okay? One more. Okay, so how effortful does that look? On a scale from 0 to 1? Basically not, right? I'm not having to use my core or my legs to push the gun from spot to spot. I'm not driving the gun around really. My big priority is on calling a shot by seeing whatever means. I feel it, I see it, whatever. I look my eye to the next spot, and then the gun follows. That's a very important distinction. That's the single most important quality control tool you can have when you're training transitions, dry or live. Right? There's a moment where you look your eye to the spot that you want to hit, and you're waiting for the color to show up from your sights. Right? If that's not happening on every transition, it tells you most likely your eyes are not working hard enough to get out ahead of the gun, and you're not really going to have much perception of what's going on when they're shooting in real time. Make sense? All right, so those are the 2 most important things. Vision, getting your eye ahead of the spot, and then not overdoing it with trying to push the gun to the spot. Just letting the gun show up. People have described it like a computer mouse before. You just look at a spot and you just naturally kind of steer it at one speed to where it needs to go. Right, so we have a transition drill here, basically with minimal transition in width, but quite a bit in depth. We got targets at like 5 and 15 yards. And like I said, we're gonna draw and shoot one shot on each in alternation. My priority is mostly on my vision and not over trying to push the gun around. So I'll show you a good and a bad example of how this is gonna go. Not super tighty in the back. I'm kind of going just on the green, so a little bit less confirmation that's probably appropriate, but it's concentric around. It's not like gross transitional errors, right? So that's one example. I'm looking at the spot. The second I see that green, I'm gonna instantly get on the trigger. There's another example. Let's see what we think is wrong with this. Right, what was the difference? Way over trying, right? It was quicker, no doubt it was quicker. It might even be, if you just score it for zones, it might even be a comparable score. But like my body is locked together, like my head and shoulders are together. I'm sticking my eye to the sight and I'm just trying to force the gun from spot to spot as fast as I can, rather than just finding the spot with my eyes and letting my body follow. Okay, so that's gonna be the big priority here. Make sense? Everyone understands the drill, what we're trying to do? I'll patch up this bad memory over here and then we'll get started. Okay. Right, it's kind of the two things that are really in question are your vision. Definitely, that part's hard, right? To keep your eye out ahead on the spot on those really little transitions with a lot of depth. It's tough to get your eye out ahead of the gun and like get your eye to accommodate both those targets at the same speed. And when you make that happen, usually the pacing kind of sounds the same no matter what direction you're going, which is sort of a good way to keep a loose bearing. One of the ways you can tell if it's going well. The other thing is getting your body to not over transition or tense up on the gun. We're going to change up the actual procedure on this a little bit in a way that's going to test that even more. Right, so I will do it and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So basically doing 3, 3, 1, 1. Right, using irregular numbers of shots to test both your grip and your recoil control, as well as that visual element that we just worked on. Right, for most people, a lot of people anyway, when you start pushing to go fast, forcing yourself to split the gun hard, like that's the kind of thing where they're gonna either jump their eye back to their sight because the sight's flashing around a whole bunch, or maybe even you want to grip the gun hard with your firing hand because you want to try to split the gun as hard as you can. Lots of different weird tension things will crop in. And doing something like this is going to test that even more. This is going to test the whole system and not just so much your vision and your loose core. Right, this is going to be really demanding. This is a lot like MXAD if you've tried that. Okay, so questions? We'll take a couple cracks at this and then we're going to probably go to lunch. Okay?
1 1 3 3.
3 3 1 1.
3 3 1 1.
In either order. Start on either target.
Action.
So we're gonna come back after lunch here, after a brief break, and run this stage. There's no exceptions or rules, I don't think. I think we proofed it, so anything, it's a regular USPSA stage. If you can see it, you can shoot it. We're gonna talk a little bit about visualization and how to build a plan, and more importantly, how to adhere to a plan before we begin. So what's the first step in getting a stage plan together?
Counting the rounds.
Counting the number of rounds, and then?
Knowing where all the targets are.
Yes, those are two interrelated, very important things, right? So in the case of this stage, you're gonna have to go all the way to the inside closet here on both sides, and then pretty well shoot stuff moving around all the way across. I think it's 20 rounds. Okay. Visualization-wise, having a proper visualization is a really important thing, like kind of no matter the size of the drill. There's really no drill too small to practice mentally rehearsing and having, a well-programmed plan for what you're going to do. Like even if it's a drill like we've been doing this morning, it's very small. Having visualization reps and cueing yourself to what you want to do is pretty important. So you've heard me talk all morning about looking at small spots, applying different confirmation levels. That's one example of part of what should be in your visualization program. You should be able to close your eyes and recall in fast motion the individual spot you want to hit on every target, and depending what you're shooting divisionally, probably the level of confirmation and what that's going to mean to you on those targets as well. it's a good idea to have visual points that you want to look to guide your way through the stage anytime you have to do gun handling stuff. Like if I have to reload, it's probably smart to look at it. And by connecting visions from, you know, this target to next step is reload with your actual eye, I mean, that's going to make you more successful as well. Same deal like we talked about, we were doing the long motions. I like to make it a habit of looking down at the spot I want to go to. So these are all like a list of objects and spots that you're going to look to on the stage that you should be able to close your eyes and recall and fast forward. So I'd like you to be thinking about that as you walk the stage. We'll give you 5 or 6 minutes to walk it, and we'll create a plan, and we'll reconvene in a minute after you guys have done that, and then we'll start shooting. Sound good? How about it?
Where's the starting position?
Wherever. Anywhere.
The 180 is the back fault line. Okay, to be clear.
Stand by.
This is a drill that you're probably already familiar with called accelerator. Basically, you're practicing using all 3 conformation types in very rapid succession, right? Which is something we've already been doing quite a bit today. Let's briefly overview it. Conformation types: start at 1 and go to 3. Basically, conformation 1 is pretty much point shooting. We're using like your grip and your index to look at a spot and just shoot really without any real sight information at all. Pretty much point shooting. Number 3 would be like letting your sight completely stop moving on the spot you're looking and then initiating the shooting, right? So you're trying to stack shots as precisely as possible. Obviously, in between those two, there's a lot of gradient, especially if you're shooting iris sights. There's a lot of nuance to how you can successfully land shots on target, but generally speaking, conformation 2 is when you're shooting when the sight is still moving around. You're not waiting for it to stop, but you can see what it's doing, right? So you can kind of see front to back, you kind of have each of those. It would be reasonable to apply each of those 3 respective conformation types, 1, 2, and 3, in order to successfully, repeatedly get points on all of those. We want to be able to draw, and like I think the original drill, you probably draw, shoot all 3 targets, reload, and shoot them back again. I don't really do that usually. I think you can learn plenty from doing just one drawing and shooting 6 rounds. So we're going to do that. We want to be able to pretty much put up the same time no matter what target you start on, even if you shoot a goofy order, because they're pretty close together this way, right? Just a lot of distance front to back. So that's what we're going to try a little bit here. All right, ears. Push down to the gun a little bit on that close one. It's still an A, but that's obviously a problem that can affect you worse than a target that's harder. That was 2.7. I'll try the opposite direction. Last shot, I shanked it with my whole hand. So there's a little low left. That's 275 within 100th. And just to keep it real, I'll start in the middle and try one real go, middle, right, left, just to mess around. Transition a little bit shallow on that last target, so I got a close Charlie, like just outside on the entry, and that one was 293. So just about the same time. Even though, like, anecdotally, you might say it's a little bit more of an actual transition in width, but since they're all this close, it's really the same. Sound good? That's what we're going to be doing a little bit. Break. 4 setups.
Yeah, ready now. Thanks for waiting for me.
This is a good way to practice stage skills of stringing lots of stuff together with a relatively simple setup. So we have a random smattering of targets. We're basically going to do designated target, which is where you pick one target and engage it between every single transition. And we're going to do it in one position and another position, right? So you're going to have to kind of remember the order that you chose, as it's going to shift around a little bit, or choose a new one. Honestly, I don't care. The point is to have a durable visualization and adhere to your plan rigidly, and not just like transition to random targets or get hung up visually on stuff that you're not intended to be shooting at that point. Okay, so you have a position here. Again, you can use whichever target you'd like for the designated target. I think I'm probably just going to go, for the sake of these, I'll shoot this plate on the left. Okay, so it'll be plate, partial, plate, 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 open, plate, move. Plate, partial, plate, open, plate, plate, plate. Sound good? Everybody understands?
So we're picking the same targets we shot from one position, just moving over to the other.
Exactly. So you have one target, you're going to re-engage between every position. I like to do that on the steel just because it keeps the round count down considerably. If you do this a little bit, we're not going to
target or every position.
Every target. and every position. Okay, so you're going to basically engage this once, move over and re-engage with the same order. So this is obviously a pretty extended length shooting task. It's probably going to be up to 12 or 14 seconds, and your job is just be on attack mode visually, getting your eye out ahead of the gun, not letting these skills deteriorate in the context of a pretty long and demanding memorization challenge here. With me?
How many of these are in our array?
All of them. But you don't have to engage them all.
Alright. Junior air, careful. North Campus. Missouri be okay.
More B-roll. Does everyone loosely understand what's going on there? I have one pickup, so I looked a little out of order when I got over to this side, but basically I'm picking one target, right? I'm going to re-engage it between every transition. I'm returning to that target every single
So
time.
it's a plate and 2 targets in plate. In a plate. That's it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
Plate, 2 target plate, plate, 2 target plate, plate. It shares.
What's that?
Each
You,
there's a spot
you
that shares
shoot
a plate.
one target, and then you come back to the plate after, and then you shoot.
No, I get that. But like as far as the section that you shoot, it's plate, target, plate.
It's whatever you
target,
want.
plate, plate. Oh,
Yes.
it's whatever you want.
Yeah.
You shoot a
You
plate,
just have to
shoot
pick
a target.
the-
You
you
shoot
pick
that
the
plate again,
designated
you go to
target.
the next target, so on and so forth until you've shot all the targets,
Okay.
punctuated by the plate. You go to the next position and you basically rinse and repeat that. The array might look a little different. The length of the run might look a little bit different, but that's basically what we're doing. Okay? Break.
Hey, can you describe your visualization, like on what that is?
That's probably a good idea. So we talked a little bit about visualization when we were going on the stage, right? This is going to be a pretty intense visualization task. Honestly, this is what I would describe as an execution drill, where what you're really straining is your ability to create a program and execute it well the first time. Okay? So when I'm visualizing through this, like you saw for like an hour and a half before I started shooting there, I'm able to be able to close my eyes and look at the exact point I want to hold on every target and what the aiming scheme is going to look like. And I can look at spot, spot, spot in my mind and know what all the spots are going to be. So, for example, over here, my visualization program is something like, spot in the back of the gun has a touch point right here. The gun comes up, I look at a spot exactly in the middle of that plate. I look at the actual Alpha Charlie line on the partial, spot on the plate, spot on the plate, spot on the plate, spot on the open target, shoot that wide open as fast as I can, spot on the plate, spot on the gun to hit this reload, spot on the ground to make sure I hit this position, then rinse and repeat basically, right? Spot on the plate, AC line, spot on the plate, burn it down, spot on the plate, spot on the plate, spot on the plate. Everyone understand? That's like 30 items that you need to be able to memorize and recite in fast motion without thinking about it with your eyes closed, right? So that is really what we're testing here, is your ability to create a program and recall it without using the front of your brain. It should just be subconscious by the time you show up to execute it. All right?
Piece of cake.
Break. Basically, where you're working on creating a visualization, right? That last one was a good example. What you're really testing is your ability to create a program and stick to it so your first run is the best run, or at least, a comparably good run, if that makes sense. So we're gonna do this again. I want everyone to go through and dry fire the plan. New plan, different plan, I really don't care. We're gonna go through and I want you to dry fire execute this. I want you to take it just as seriously as we did on those drills, like you're actually shooting real rounds, right? I want to demonstrate that. I'm going to dry fire it again. I'll do it the opposite plan, right? Again, I'm going to demonstrate like what the real timing of this is going to be and pretty much demonstrate how you should be dry firing everything all the time. guys got it? Same as before. I just need to basically get it on camera this time, okay? So we'll go through, take a quick walk through, whatever, and then we're gonna get to it, okay? All right, guys, it's just a new stage. It's quite a bit more demanding on the shot difficulty than what we did yesterday. Nothing's changed. I just want you to try, like we've talked a lot about some of the stuff you need to work on. I just want you to apply it as best you can first thing this morning. Then we're gonna go do drills. We're gonna leave this in the rear view, okay? One attempt, that's it, right? So let's start walking. Get 3 or 4 minutes here and we'll get to it. Tell me when you're good, Joel.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Send it.
All right, guys, so this stage kind of brings up a lot of the stuff that we're gonna work on today, okay? It's basically, in summary, it's short motions, it's long motions, it's objects between you and the target. That's the stuff, the nuts and bolts of the major stuff that's costing most of you time, right? The last point I think is probably the most critical. In many cases, you guys are doing a good job, like shooting diligently through this tough section. You come over to here where you have these targets that are pretty easy, but you know, you have the wall like that are covering up as they appear, right? And there's just the spot focus is just out the window. So it's just like extra shots, it's no alphas on potentially the easiest targets in the stage, right? So what needs to change there? Focus. I kind of just said the answer, right?
Pick the spot.
Spot focus. Spot focus is imperative, right? Allow yourself to see the spot, then apply whatever confirmation you want. You should be able to shoot those just about as fast as you can pull the trigger as long as you look at a spot. But like extra shots or dropping points on those easy targets is really not appropriate, okay? Other subject is the long versus the short motions. From this start position over here, right, I have from here to like a 4-yard motion to get to where this target opens up right here, where I can really see the part I want to hit. I should be moving in this section. Gun up. That's imperative, right? That the gun is up and ready to crank when you get over here. In the interim, this is kind of like a medium space, medium size motion, right? So how you handle it in mounted versus unmounted is kind of up to you. But it's imperative that when you get over there, the gun is like gripped, aimed, ready to go, so you can be shooting as soon as your sights let you. Does that make sense? It's really important that you don't end up like stuck in shooting on the move mode in these sections, like with the gun fully mounted where it's not appropriate, because you'll find yourself like looking down range, waiting for the target to show up and walking at the speed of smell where you should just be running to a spot that you look to on the ground, right? So pay attention when I run this stage, pay attention to what my head's doing, where like how my vision is working to guide me through the stage, and that should make it more obvious, and I'll be trying to make it as obvious as I can as I do that.
You want somebody to take the timer?
It's on delay.
Are you ready? Stand by.
Range is clear. I did approximately nothing, none of the things that I said I was going to do. Okay, so you see the head snap from the first position to find the spot I want to go over here. You see the head snap in this position over here to find the spot I want to go on the ground. Those are all important so I can find the targets as necessary. Otherwise, right, you see the mix of mounted and unmounted motions so that I can get to the spots as quickly as I can, but the gun's up and ready to go every time I get there, right? That's most of what we just talked about. Guys, we're going to start to talk about soft entries. So what I mean by that is basically engaging targets while you're still moving around or while your weight is still moving as you're getting into a position, which I'm sure you've probably noticed happens all the time in our sport. The important things for the most part, like you have to have some kind of a sound technique to be able to minimize the amount of motion in your sights while you're moving. That part's pretty easy to sort out through some dry fire. You just kind of experiment with how much you need to bend your knees and how much you need to roll your feet to make it so your sights don't bounce every time you step. You're never going to totally eliminate that motion when your foot hits the ground, but you can make it a lot more subtle by being careful how you place your feet on the ground. As a rule of thumb, right, I kind of just get a little bit lower than I need to. I try to take deeper steps and place my feet down gently, and that more or less gets the job done. After that, it pretty much requires practice. I can't really give you like a master key to make that easier on you. The other thing that's a little bit more difficult to master is keeping your vision where you want it. Because when your sights bounce around a bunch, you're going to be inclined to look at the sight because it's flashing around and it's between your face and the thing you're trying to hit. So you'll end up with a lot of problems with shots tracking in given directions based on where you're moving if the vision is not parked on a spot like you want to, like you might have noticed over there, right? Either the vision just opens up completely and the shots go all over the target, or in a lot of cases, like you saw, they'll push in the direction that you're moving. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you have a drill here where you have a vision barrier in some cases and basically a position you need to move into. The drill is going to be, I'm going to crack this plate from here, I'm going to move, engage these two targets on the way into the position, and then hit the plate again from the deep side of the window. Okay. Sound good? Yep. Any questions so far? I'm just going to do this once, then I'll talk some more. Another question that comes up a lot, or that I see people screwing up a lot on the stages, is how to know essentially how fast you're going to be able to engage these targets, and therefore, you know, at what point do I need to start shooting so that I don't like miss the timing, if you will, and be shooting targets from much farther than I need to in a scenario like this, or end up showing up and doing the marching band in the position because you told yourself you're going to shoot them on the move, right? That happened to a few of us over there, right? Just miscalibrating or misunderstanding where you're going to be doing shooting on the move. So one of the things that I'll do for that is put myself in the position I want to be in, and I'll basically in reverse visualize engaging these targets as I back out. And when I stop engaging, that should be approximately the point where I'm going to start shooting. So it'll go like bang, 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 bang. All right. I know in this space right here, I need the gun to be firing, and then as long as I shoot at that pace, right, which should be easy to predict, I'm going to carry myself nicely right into that position. There's obviously, I pretty strongly recommend against using choreography or like numbers of steps to land myself into a position, but there are lots of situations like this where it's necessary, and that's a good tool that can help you sort it out. Okay, so I'm gonna want everybody to try this. We got three stations. We're gonna come up, basically dry fire this, practice this back out trick, park yourself in the position, visualize your way out of it. I'm just gonna give you a nice little roadmap to see like how you're gonna be able to time your way into that position while keeping your eye where you want it. Okay, 3 shooters. Most of the time, when you get to shoot on the move, it's not always directly in front of you. Most of the time, not always. That was kind of an ironic statement. It's not always in front of you, right? In a lot of cases, you're kind of working laterally around the targets. In a lot of cases, the targets are like way off axis from you, and you got to still be able to get accurate shots on them. Sound familiar? Right. Middle of that stage, that was kind of an issue, especially working this other way. When we had the closer, faster stage yesterday, I saw several folks choose to shoot like basically targets in line this way, just so they don't have to track away, then have their hips offline to continue moving, because it's kind of a tongue twister sort of a sensation. But we have a drill that's going to require you to do that, right? So I'll do it, and then we'll talk about it. You understand what we're doing here? Pretty much at that point, right? The point is you're gonna draw, whack a plate, move into this middle zone, shoot these two targets, you know, as they present, right, left, predictably, ideally, while keeping your weight moving in a given direction. So to make that happen, you're gonna have to get your hips like at least halfway turned down range so you can at a minimum hitch step and hit them while you're still keeping your weight moving. Sound good? Try the other one too.
Right one first. You want
What's
to hit
that?
the far right one first.
Right, so you're shooting them as they appear, like as if there was walls in the way. Okay. This one's a little bit wider, so it might be a little tougher. Okay. Not an easy drill by any means, especially when you start to get these targets where you have to reach behind yourself with this leg to keep your hips pointed this way so you can actually hit it. It's very tough. So shooting on the move, especially in training, I think it's a good idea to just hold yourself to the same speed and accuracy standard as you would on the target as if you're flat-footed. So I'm expecting to shoot these predictively because they're 7 or 8 yards or so, right? And just ignore the fact that I'm in an uncomfortable body position and kind of figure out what's going wrong to make sure the hits get there through repetition. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. Break.
Let's swap that one.
So this is one of the only draw drills I do. It's called 2 at 25. Your goal is to be able to draw, whack 2 alpha in less than 2 seconds at this yardage. right? So basically the only way you can make that happen is if you can build a consistently perfect grip at about 1.3 to 1.4 to buy you time to realistically shoot a proper reactive second shot. You can press it down harder than that. Like you can like push it down and like try to get away with shooting with less confirmation or with a more aggressive shooting style. But I think this drill it's nice that it pretty well tells you if you're doing it right or not. And if you want to do it like 5 or 6 times in a row successfully, you just got to be able to shoot reactively with a still sight on both shots. So that's kind of the way this is going to play. First shot was a little slow, I had to find it down. Second shot it hooked over, that was 192. That was 188. Right, so that's around 2 seconds. Averaging around 2 seconds with mostly good hits. Definitely taking the time to at least aim those properly. My grip's not totally sorted out, but that's fine. The other thing I'll do is I'll do this at this pretty extreme distance where the target is just going to tell you if it doesn't go right, and then I'll go up to 5 yards, right? So let's take a little field trip here. Right. And I'll do the exact same thing, right? Not just shooting for the A zone, but still looking at a spot and trying to only shoot when I get color on the spot. And then, you know, looking at the spot and applying the relevant confirmation, which in this case would be 1 or 2, either point shooting or seeing any color anywhere around it. Okay? So I'm basically trying to see what stays and what goes between this distance and that distance. Obviously, confirmation level, right, is going to be dramatically different to hit an A zone or even a tennis ball size group at this distance. You just need to see color anywhere on the spot you want to hit. Trigger wise, right, you can pretty well jam hard on the trigger carelessly at this distance versus at the farther distance you're going to have to confirm absolutely, probably press the trigger a little bit more carefully than you're used to, etc. Right, but what I like about doing it this way is it doesn't require any real brain power. Like if I have just 50 rounds at the end of a day of when I have a quick chance to get to the range, I mean, all I have to do is shoot it and try to make the par, and the target's going to tell you if you fail. I guess it doesn't require any real deep analysis. It's just either you're fast enough to make it with a good grip or you're not, and the target will remind you of that. Okay. So that's what we're going to do a little bit. We'll do 4 or 5 reps back there, come up here, and bounce back and forth, and kind of see what stays and goes, and I'll give you guys a little bit of gun handling critiquing, because this is one of the few drills I'll do where we'll actually focus on that more closely. Okay, that's it. Shoot both targets from one side of the stick, then the other side of the stick. That's the nuts and bolts, right? The stick is just a device to get you to move your feet, make it so maybe you have to tip your weight around. How you specifically handle this choreography-wise isn't really the point. It's to like figure out a solution that feels like it's gonna work and then just focus on what you're seeing and try to shoot as aggressively as possible. We're like 6 yards away or so you should be shooting those pretty much flat out with aggressive transitions and trying to not let the movement be a factor. All right, that's gonna be the point for now. And we'll modify the range and stuff as necessary to change it up. Okay, so got 3 stations. One you can work forward or backwards. You know, one you can go this way, and that one's a little bit wider, but it's the same setup. You're going either left or right, but you're gonna have to transition a lot wider. Okay, that's what we're doing. To work on more transition drills with vision barriers, right? So this is not like a standardized setup, but this is some samples of how I would normally work on this. Barrel stack, window port, couple smattering of targets, and basically just do some of the similar stuff we did yesterday. Remember when we did the designated target with the 2 positions, but now we're going to put objects between you and the target and strip down the actual procedure a little bit. Okay, so I'll start here. Basically, I'm gonna shoot the white post plate last in 3 positions in this case, right? So it'll go like this. Obviously you're working, every time you transition pretty much there's going to be an object between you and where you're trying to look to. And you're going to have to free that up by looking to the spot you want to get to and be patient to let the part of the target you want to hit free up. Makes sense? Over here, start right here. I'll go plate, paper, paper. That's better. Try this one over here. So, simple procedure, right? Just not a very easy thing to do. Like, you got to get your eye well out ahead of the gun, find the spot you want to go to, and it's probably going to be occluded by some kind of an object. You have to be patient to let it get out of the way. Otherwise, generally, you'll have targets. The protruding part of the target that you see first will usually be the part that catches bullets because you're not being patient to let your eye go where you need to hit. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing. 3 stations. So what's going on here, guys? New drill. It's going to work on most of the same concepts we've been doing, right? It's applying fundamentals, keeping your vision where you want it, doing some dynamic shooting stuff around vision barriers. It's not going to be easy, but that's kind of what we're up to here. This is going to be one that's a little bit more demanding on your actual dynamic skills as far as your ability to shoot on the move. Procedurally, you got 4 targets. You're going to shoot the outside ones from the outside of the barrels, the middle 2 as they appear, you know, between the barrels. Okay, so working this way will be target 1, 3, 2, 4 in the order, 2 on each.
Okay. 1, 3, 2. So, it seems like a constant.
I like to start on this so that I can see the first 3 targets from the left side, so that I have to cross over the vision barrier to get at the ones in the middle. Okay? Another setup over here. It's going to be the same thing, just obviously the shots are a little tougher, so I'm going to have to be a little more careful in the shooting. So that's the same drill, right? Same procedure, just a little bit more confirmation required over there. Might even like move my feet a little bit more carefully just to keep the sights nice and stable. Guys, have any questions about this so far? One of the big things that happens with this, as you might have noticed so far, is there's what you describe as a tracking element. So basically, if you work with me here, if you just look at a target and walk this way, you can see the target will pan with you. So if you don't keep your eye glued to that spot, you're going to push shots in the direction you're going. Right, so this is the visual. The visual spot focus is at a premium here. You got to not be distracted by the objects between you and the target, which is the natural thing to do, or your sight flashing around when you're hammering the close guys. Cool? Break. All right, guys, before we wrap, do you guys have any questions for me about some of the stuff we worked on? Nothing outstanding? So as far as how you apply everything we've worked on, like it starts kind of at the base, right? Like you have to learn how to keep your hands out of your way, make it so that your grip is consistently coming together, it's well assembled, and that your grip pressures aren't fighting you all the time. That's not really a fight that you're ever going to stop fighting. Like it's just going to take different things to stress you out and make you have to focus on that again. Everything can be a fundamentals drill if you make it about the fundamentals, right? After that, like, you know, as you ascend sort of the hierarchy of skills, you have vision problems, as we've talked about. No matter what sighting system you have on your gun, you're looking at a small spot on the target for every target, and then you're just going to apply the appropriate confirmation at that point. What that's going to be will depend on whether you're shooting daughter irons and basically your skill level and how hard the shot is. Does that make sense? As we get even farther down the chain, most everyone has issues with shoulder tension and body tension, right? Where there's just, again, it takes some level of stress or some cognitive load. You'll start like tensing up your neck and shoulders, and like basically your transitions get all jacked up because you're tense and you're moving a fixed object very slowly in order to maintain precision. But pretty much every drill we've done has worked on at least 2 of those things, right? It's just basically it's going to depend up to the individual what cues is going to be required to make sure you stay out of your own way when it comes to that kind of stuff. So hopefully you kind of loosely understand what I'm talking about when it comes to that and what the procedures are and how to work on every drill. But that's the nuts and bolts of what we're doing here, right? This is the class. Hopefully you have a really firm understanding of how to train everything we've worked on so far. Okay, no questions still? All right, cut, director. So the way I come up with drills and the way I shape my own training is just like at least minimum, and I recommend for everyone, minimum 40% is focused on fundamentals, and that's probably like 40 to 60%. And what's left is going to be usually execution type training where you're stringing multiple skills together, whether that's for the interest of seeing what falls apart or just finding something new to work on, right? So like it's a lot of overlap as far as what drills fall into what category. The fundamentals drills can be something as simple as trigger control at speed or inline fundamentals like doubles and prac-ac, or it could be something like bar hop. Like for someone that's a higher level shooter, that you could look at that like it's a fundamentals drill, because you're not liable to screw up to just taking a couple steps apart, but shooting fast and aggressively, maybe that's the problem, right? That's what I mean by any drill can be a fundamentals drill if you let it be. The execution type drills is going to be stuff where you have like 3 or more skills on display at a time, right? Something that's again, that's kind of up to the individual what that means, but definitely a drill like that we just did, track the A zone, that's what I pretty much consider to be an execution type drill. You have to have your shooting on the move skills have to be locked down so you can keep your feet soft, keep your hips squared up to every target. You have to keep your grip locked in, and you got to have your spies out on the spots and avoid getting jammed up by the vision barriers and not letting the tracking elements. Like that's like 4 different things you got to like hold in balance to make it work right. So that's what I mean by an execution type drill. That's the sort of stuff you do when you're going to go to a match, and you basically have to practice putting all of your skills together and making it so you have a durable visualization that'll work under pressure. Does that make sense? As far as designing actual drills, I take a lot of inspiration from these cats, but also it's like anytime I'm presenting with something in a match that feels really uncomfortable, or if like someone was asking me a question like, okay, you're doing bar hop, like which leg do you lead with? It's like the fact that you're even thinking about that means that this is something that you need to work on more, right? Like after an hour of dry fire strung over a week, you won't have that question anymore. It'll be about like what's going on down here, not down here. But that clearly demonstrates you've found a drill or an area that's going to create stress and draw out fundamentals problems for you. Okay. Word.